Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the alien fleet come closer to Earth. The enemy ships looked like giant pieces of broken glass floating through space. They moved in perfect lines, all together like a deadly dance. Jake had been in many battles before, but nothing like this. The first message from the aliens came 3 days ago. It was simple and cold. They called themselves the Zephyrian Collective. They wanted Earth and all human colonies. They gave humanity 1 hour to surrender. Jake remembered laughing at that message. Humans had never been good at giving up. The fighting started exactly 1 hour later. The alien ships fired beams of pure energy that could cut through human ships like they were made of paper. Their weapons were far better than anything humans had ever built. Their ships moved faster and hit harder. By all the rules of war, humans should have lost in the first day. But humans had something the aliens did not expect. They kept fighting even when they should have died. They kept coming back even when their ships were broken. They found new ways to fight even when the old ways failed. Captain Lisa Hayes was fighting near the moon. Her ship had lost half its weapons and most of its armor. She should have pulled back to Earth, but instead she led her damaged ship straight into the middle of the alien formation. Her crew followed her without question. They destroyed 3 alien ships before their own ship finally exploded. Lisa and most of her crew died, but they took many enemies with them. Colonel Steve Parker was on Mars when the aliens attacked the Red Planet. He had only 5,000 soldiers to defend the whole planet. The aliens sent 50,000 troops in, their strange floating armor. Steve should have surrendered to save his men. Instead, he used the underground tunnels and caves of Mars to fight a different kind of war. His soldiers would attack and then disappear. They would hit the aliens and then vanish like ghosts. The aliens had better weapons and more soldiers, but they could not fight an enemy they could not see. The war went on for 8 long months. Humans lost most of their ships and many of their colonies. Millions of people died, but they never stopped fighting. Every time the aliens thought they had won, humans would find a new way to hurt them. Every time the aliens pushed forward, humans would push back twice as hard. The aliens began to learn fear. They had conquered many worlds before, but those other races had given up when the fight became too hard. Humans were different. They seemed to get stronger when things looked hopeless. They fought harder when they were losing. The Zephyrian Collective had never met anything like them. The final battle happened above Earth. Jake Morrison led what was left of the human fleet against the main alien force. His ship, the Liberty, was old and damaged. Most of his weapons were broken. His crew was tired and wounded. But they were still fighting. The battle was terrible and beautiful at the same time. Ships exploded like new stars being born. Laser beams crossed through space like deadly lightning. Men and women died defending their home world. The aliens fought with cold precision, but humans fought with desperate courage. Then something impossible happened. Jake's ship managed to damage the main alien command ship. The giant crystalline vessel began to spin out of control. Its weapons stopped firing. Its shields went down. The alien fleet suddenly seemed confused without their leader giving orders. Jake could have destroyed the enemy command ship. His weapons were ready. His crew was waiting for the order. One shot would have ended the alien leadership. The war might have been over. But Jake did something that shocked everyone, including his own crew. He opened a communication channel to the alien ship instead of firing his weapons. The face that appeared on his screen was not human at all. It looked like it was made of living crystal, with eyes that glowed like small suns. This was Crystalline Overlord Vexthon, the leader of the Zephyrian fleet. "Your ship is broken," Jake said in a calm voice. "Your fleet is scattered, your weapons are down. By all the rules of war, I should destroy you right now." The alien leader seemed confused. His crystal face showed no expression, but his voice carried surprise. "Then why do you wait, human? Why do you not finish what you started?" Jake looked around his bridge at his tired crew. These men and women had fought for 8 months. They had lost friends and family. They had every right to want revenge. But Jake had a different idea. "Because someone needs to remember this war," Jake said slowly. "Someone needs to go back to your people and tell them what happened here. Someone needs to tell the whole galaxy. Who humans really are and what we can do. He paused and looked directly at the alien commander. That someone is you. The alien seemed even more confused. You would let me live? You would let me return to my people? Yes, Jake said. But you will tell them the truth. You will tell them that humans do not make war for fun or for conquest. We fight to protect our home and our people. You will tell them that we could have destroyed you all, but we chose not to. Jake gestured to the stars around them. You will tell the galaxy that humanity has a rule. We always spare one life, one witness, one survivor to carry the story back, because the universe needs to remember what we are capable of and what we choose not to do. The alien commander was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke again. Why should I tell this story? Why should I help you? Jake smiled for the first time in months. Because if you do not tell the truth, if you do not warn others about what happens when they threaten human lives, then the next time we meet your people or others like them, we might not be so merciful. Overlord Vexthon understood. Jake allowed the alien command ship to leave with one escort vessel. The crystalline ships disappeared into space, carrying their wounded leader and a handful of survivors back to Zephyrian territory. The other human ships watched in amazement as their admiral let the enemy escape. Some of them were angry. Some thought Jake had made a mistake. But Jake knew exactly what he was doing. The war was over, but the real victory was just beginning. Soon every species in the galaxy would hear the story of humanity's first contact war. They would learn about the strange humans who fought like demons but showed mercy like angels. They would learn about the species that could destroy their enemies but chose to teach them instead. And they would all learn about humanity's mercy rule. 3 years had passed since the war with the Zephyrians ended. Humans had rebuilt their damaged colonies and built new ones. They had created bigger and better ships. Most importantly, they had learned that they were not alone in a friendly universe. There were dangerous things out there in the dark between the stars. Captain Danny Roberts commanded the exploration ship, Pioneer. It was not a warship, but it carried enough weapons to defend itself. Danny and his crew were mapping new star systems and looking for planets where humans could build homes. They were far from Earth when they received the distress signal. The signal came from a research station in the Kepler system. The message was broken and full of static, but Danny could understand enough. Pirates were attacking. People were dying. Help was needed right away. Danny knew about the Corvin Raiders. Every spacer in the galaxy knew their reputation. They were biomechanical creatures who had fused their bodies with machines. They attacked research stations, cargo ships, and colonies. They took everything of value and killed everyone they found. No one had ever survived a Corvin attack to tell what happened. The Corvins flew ships that looked like giant insects made of metal and flesh. Their weapons could eat through ship armor like acid. They moved fast and hit hard. Most people ran when they saw Corvin ships coming. But Danny Roberts was not most people. He was human. Set course for the research station, Danny ordered his crew. Maximum speed. Lieutenant Amy Sullivan, his second in command, looked worried. Captain, we are just one ship. The Corvins usually attack in groups. We might be flying into a trap. Danny looked at the star chart on his screen. The research station had 43 people on it, scientists, engineers, and their families. Good people doing important work. Maybe, he said. But those people need help. That is what we do. The Pioneer reached the Kepler system 2 hours later. What they found was worse than Danny had expected. 5 Corvin ships surrounded the research station like wolves around wounded prey. The station's shields were failing. Parts of it were already on fire. The Corvin ships were strange and frightening to look at. They had metal hulls that seemed to breathe like living things. Weapons that looked like claws and teeth stuck out from their sides. Green light pulsed through tubes that looked like veins. These were not just machines. They were something much worse. All hands to battle stations, Danny announced over the ship's communication system. We are going to save those people. Marine Sergeant Rick Thompson led the boarding teams. He was a big man with scars from the Zephyrian War. His soldiers trusted him completely. "Captain," he said over the radio, "my boys are ready. Just get us close to those alien ships." The battle began when the Pioneer opened fire on the nearest Corvin vessel. Human weapons had improved a lot since the war with the Zephyrians. The lasers cut through the biomechanical armor like it was made of soft metal. The Corvin ship screamed. It actually screamed like a wounded animal. The other Corvin ships turned away from the research station to face this new threat. They had expected an easy raid on helpless scientists. They had not expected to fight trained human soldiers with military weapons. Lieutenant Amy Sullivan coordinated the space battle while Sergeant Thompson prepared his Marines for boarding action. The Pioneer was smaller than the Corvin ships, but it was faster and better armed. Danny used hit-and-run tactics, striking hard and then moving away before the aliens could respond. One by one, the Corvin ships began to take damage. Their biomechanical hulls leaked green fluid into space. Their weapons stopped working. Their strange hybrid technology could not handle the focused attack from human forces. The first Corvin ship died when Amy put 3 laser shots into what looked like its brain center. The ship convulsed once and then went dark. The second ship tried to ram the Pioneer, but Danny was too good a pilot. He spun his ship away at the last second and let Rick's Marines board the alien vessel through its damaged hull. What happened next was not really a battle. It was more like a demonstration. Rick Thompson and his Marines moved through the Corvin ship like a force of nature. They had trained for this kind of fighting. They knew how to work together in tight spaces. They knew how to kill quickly and efficiently. The Corvins were dangerous fighters when they were attacking helpless victims, but they had never faced human Marines in close combat. The aliens were used to their victims being afraid and confused. Humans were neither afraid nor confused. They were angry. Within 2 hours, 4 Corvin ships were destroyed or disabled. The 5th ship, the command vessel, was badly damaged, but still fighting. Its war chief, a creature called Graklos, found himself trapped in his own ship with dead crew members all around him. Rick Thompson and his Marines broke through the final door to the command center. They expected to find the alien leader ready to fight to the death. Instead, they found him sitting in his chair, staring at the screens that showed his destroyed fleet. Graklos was a horrible thing to look at. Half of his body was original alien, flesh, gray and scaly like a lizard. The other half was mechanical, with metal arms and glowing red eyes. Cables and tubes connected the living parts to the machine parts. He should have been frightening, but instead he just looked defeated. "Kill me and finish this," Graklos said through his translator device. His voice sounded like grinding metal. Rick Thompson kept his weapon ready but did not fire. "Captain Roberts wants to talk to you first." Captain Danny Roberts arrived on the alien ship a few minutes later. He walked through the corridors filled with dead Corvins and broken machinery. He had seen war before, but this was different. This was what happened when pirates met real soldiers. Danny found the alien war chief in the ship's medical bay. Human. Doctors were treating his wounds. This surprised Graklos more than anything else that had happened. "Why do your healers help me?" the alien asked. "I came here to kill and steal. I would have shown no mercy to your people." Danny sat down across from the wounded alien. "Because you are going home," he said simply. Graklos stared at him with his mechanical eyes. "Home? You defeated my entire raiding fleet. You killed my warriors. You destroyed my ships. Now you let me live?" "That is exactly what I am doing." Danny replied. "Your raiding days are over. Your fleet is scrap metal. Your threat to innocent people is finished. But you get to go home and tell everyone what happened here." The alien war chief was confused. In his culture, defeated enemies were either killed or made into slaves. Mercy was a weakness that got you killed. "I do not understand human thinking." Danny leaned forward. "Then let me explain it to you. You are going to return to Corvin space. You are going to tell every pirate, every raider, every would-be killer in this galaxy exactly what happens when they attack innocent people in human territory." He gestured toward the wreckage around them. "You are going to tell them about humanity's mercy rule. We always spare one life, one witness, one survivor to carry the story back. Because the galaxy needs to remember what we can do and what we choose not to do." Graklos thought about this for a long time. And if I refuse to tell this story? Danny smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. Then the next group of raiders we meet might not be so lucky. The next time, we might not spare anyone at all. The alien understood. Danny Roberts gave him a small ship and enough supplies to reach Corvan territory. Graklos left the Kepler system alone, carrying with him the memory of human power and human mercy. The research station was saved. The scientists went back to their work. But something more important had happened. The story of the Corvan raid began to spread through the galaxy. Pirates and raiders heard about the human ship that destroyed an entire Corvan fleet and then let the leader go home. They learned about humanity's strange mercy rule. They learned that humans were not soft or weak. They learned that mercy from humans was not a sign of weakness but a warning of strength. And slowly, the galaxy began to change. 5 years had passed since Captain Danny Roberts defeated the Corvan raiders. The story had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Some alien races respected humanity's strange mercy rule. Others thought it made humans look weak. The Thanox Syndicate was one of those who thought humans were soft. The Thanox Syndicate was not just a group of pirates. It was a massive criminal organization that controlled illegal trade across 12 star systems. They had armies, fleets, and enough money to buy entire planets. Their leader, Overlord Vashitar, had built his empire by being more cruel and ruthless than anyone else. Vashitar had heard the stories about humans sparing their enemies. He laughed at these tales. In his mind, mercy was the same as weakness. He decided to test these strange humans and see if they were really as dangerous as people claimed. The target he chose was New Geneva, a peaceful human colony world. The planet was known for its farms and universities. The people there grew food for other colonies and studied science. They had no military bases and very few weapons. It seemed like an easy target. Vashitar sent his entire Third Fleet to attack New Geneva, 200 warships carrying 50,000 mercenaries from a dozen different alien races. It was enough firepower to conquer most civilized worlds. He expected the humans to surrender without a fight. Commander Pete Davis was in charge of the orbital defense stations around New Geneva. He had only 12 small ships and a few hundred soldiers. When the Syndicate fleet appeared on his sensors, he knew he was in serious trouble. "Send a distress signal to Earth Fleet Command," Pete ordered his communications officer. "Tell them we need help immediately." Colonel Nina Brooks commanded the Colonial Defense Force on the planet's surface. She had 2,000 soldiers and some basic weapons. Against 50,000 alien mercenaries, her forces would not last long. But she was human, and humans did not give up easily. "All units, prepare defensive positions," Nina broadcast to her troops. "We hold until reinforcements arrive. No retreat, no surrender." The Syndicate fleet began its attack by destroying the orbital stations. Pete Davis and his small force fought bravely, but they were outnumbered 20 to 1. One by one, the human ships were destroyed. Pete's own ship was the last to die. He kept fighting until his weapon stopped working and his ship was on fire. The alien mercenaries landed on New Geneva expecting easy victory. Instead, they found that every human on the planet was ready to fight. Farmers fought with hunting rifles. Scientists built explosive devices. Even children helped by carrying messages and supplies to the soldiers. Colonel Nina Brooks used the planet's forests and mountains to fight a guerrilla war. Her soldiers would attack the aliens and then disappear into the wilderness. They destroyed supply convoys and communication equipment. They made the aliens afraid to move around at night. But there were too many enemies. Slowly, the human defenders were pushed back toward the main cities. It looked like New Geneva would fall to the Syndicate forces. Then Admiral Kate Morgan arrived with the 5th Human Fleet. Kate Morgan was a legend in the human space navy. She had fought in the Zephyrian War and many battles since then. Her ships were the newest and best that humanity could build. Her crews were veterans who had never lost a battle. The 5th Fleet dropped out of hyperspace right in the middle of the Syndicate formation. The aliens were not expecting this. They thought they had plenty of time to conquer the planet before human reinforcements could arrive. What happened next was not really a battle. It was a demonstration of what humans could do when they stopped. Holding back, Admiral Kate Morgan had studied every battle the Syndicate had ever fought. She knew their tactics, their weaknesses, and their fears. Human intelligence had been watching the Thanok Syndicate for years, waiting for them to make a mistake like this. The human ships moved like dancers in a deadly ballet. They used advanced tactics that the aliens had never seen before. They coordinated their attacks with perfect timing. They struck at exactly the right places to cause maximum damage. The Syndicate fleet was built for bullying weaker opponents. Their ships were big and impressive, but they were not designed to fight a real military force. Human weapons cut through their armor like it was made of paper. Human tactics confused and scattered their formations. Within 6 hours, half of the Syndicate fleet was destroyed. The aliens who had landed on the planet found themselves cut off from supplies and reinforcements. Some tried to surrender, but their own leaders shot them for cowardice. Overlord Vashitar watched his empire burn from the command bridge of his fortress ship. This vessel was his pride and joy, a massive warship that had never been defeated. But even it could not stand against the focused attack of human forces. Admiral Morgan led the final assault herself. Her flagship, the Retribution, was smaller than Vashitar's fortress ship, but much faster and better armed. She used the alien ship's size against it, darting around it like a wasp attacking a bear. The fortress ship's weapons were powerful but slow. They could not hit the fast-moving human vessel. Meanwhile, the Retribution's lasers found weak spots in the alien ship's armor. One by one, the fortress ship's weapons stopped working. Human Marines boarded the dying ship through holes, blown in its hull. They moved through the corridors like a force of nature, clearing out resistance with military precision. These were not the same humans who had fought the Zephyrians years ago. These were veterans of many battles, soldiers who had learned their trade through constant warfare. Overlord Vashitar found himself surrounded in his own throne room. His guards were dead. His ship was ruined. His fleet was scattered across space as burning wreckage. For the first time in his long life, he was completely defeated. Admiral Kate Morgan walked into the throne room still wearing her battle armor. She was not a large woman, but she carried herself like someone who had won many fights. Her eyes were cold as winter stars. "Your syndicate is finished," she said in a calm voice. "Your fleets are destroyed. Your armies are dead or scattered. Your reign of terror is over." Vashitar had expected torture, slavery, or a quick death. These were the fates he had given to his own enemies over the years. Instead, Admiral Morgan surprised him. "You are going home," she said. The alien crime lord stared at her. "Home? Why would you let me live? I attacked your colony. I killed your people." Kate Morgan looked around the ruined throne room. Bodies of alien mercenaries lay everywhere. The walls were covered with scorch marks from laser fire. "Because someone needs to tell the story of what happened here." She stepped closer to the defeated overlord. "You are going to return to what remains of your territories. You are going to spend the rest of your life explaining to every would-be crime lord in the galaxy what happens when they threaten human civilians." Vashitar was confused. "Why should I help you? Why should I warn others about human power?" Admiral Morgan smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. "Because if you do not tell the truth, if you do not warn others about the price of threatening innocent humans, then the next time we encounter criminal organizations like yours, we might not be so merciful." She gestured to the destruction around them. "This is what happens when you mistake mercy for weakness. We do not spare you because we are soft. We spare you because we want everyone to know exactly how hard we can be when we choose to." The alien overlord understood. Admiral Morgan gave him a small ship and enough supplies to reach Syndicate territory. Vashitar left the New Geneva system alone, carrying with him the memory of his destroyed empire and the terrible efficiency of human warfare. New Geneva was rebuilt within a year. The colonists went back to their farms and universities. But the galaxy had learned another lesson about humanity. They had learned that human mercy was not weakness but strength. They had learned that humans did not make war for pleasure, but for protection. And they had learned that crossing humanity came with a price that few could afford to pay. The story of the Syndicate's destruction spread even faster than the previous tales. Crime organizations across the galaxy began to avoid human space. Pirates found other targets. Mercenary companies refused contracts that might bring them into conflict with human forces. Slowly but surely, humanity's mercy rule was changing the galaxy, not through conquest but through reputation, not through fear alone but through the promise that mercy would be given to those who deserved it, and justice would come to those who did not. The biggest test of humanity's mercy rule came from the oldest and most dangerous enemy they had ever faced. The Veltar Collective was not like other alien races. They were a hive mind, billions of individual creatures all controlled by one massive shared consciousness. They had existed for thousands of years and had consumed entire civilizations. The Veltar did not think like other aliens. They did not understand concepts like mercy or individual choice. To them, all other life forms were either part of the collective or they were food. They had never met a species that could resist their power for long. When human colonies began expanding into space that the Veltar considered their ancient territory, the collective made a decision. They would send their war hive to absorb or destroy these new creatures called humans. The war hive was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was not a ship or a fleet. It was a single living organism the size of a small moon. Part biological, tissue, part advanced technology, all controlled by the unified will of the collective. The war hive could adapt to any defense, learn from any defeat, and grow stronger with each victory. No species had ever survived an encounter with the war hive. The collective had used it to destroy civilizations that were millions of years old. Now it was coming for humanity. General Sam Walker was in charge of defending the fortress world of Kepler Prime. This planet was humanity's most important military base in the outer colonies. It had the best weapons, the strongest shields, and the most experienced soldiers. If Kepler Prime fell, the way to Earth would be open. Commander Beth Price led the space defense forces from the orbital battle stations. She had fought pirates and raiders before, but nothing had prepared her for what she saw when the war hive arrived in the system. The thing was enormous beyond imagination. It pulsed with sickly green light and had tentacles that stretched for thousands of miles. Parts of it looked like a machine, with metal plates and weapon systems. Other parts looked alive, with what appeared to be eyes and mouths scattered across its surface. It was beautiful and horrible at the same time. Major Tony Clark commanded the ground forces on Kepler Prime. His soldiers were the best humanity had ever trained. They had weapons that could destroy cities and armor that could stop almost any attack. But looking up at the war hive blotting out the stars, even these brave men and women felt afraid. The battle began when the war hive sent out its first wave of attack organisms. These were like living spaceships, creatures bred for war that could think and adapt on their own. They swarmed toward the human defenses like angry insects. Commander Beth Price met them with everything she had. Laser batteries and missile launchers filled space with deadly fire. For a moment it looked like the human weapons were working. The attack organisms died by the hundreds, their bodies floating in space like broken toys. But then something terrible happened. The second wave of organisms had already adapted. They had learned from watching the first wave die. Their skin was now resistant to human lasers. Their movements were different, making them harder to hit with missiles. The war hive was learning. With each attack, it became better at fighting humans. It studied their tactics and developed counters. It analyzed their weapons and grew new defenses. This was how the collective had destroyed so many other civilizations. The battle lasted 3 weeks. Every day, the war hive became more dangerous. Every day, human defenders found their weapons less effective. The fortress world's shields began to fail under constant bombardment. The orbital stations were destroyed one by one. General Sam Walker watched his carefully planned defenses crumble. All of his strategies and all of his weapons seemed useless against an enemy that could adapt to anything. For the first time since the war with the Zephyrians, it looked like humanity might actually lose. But Lieutenant Alex Turner, a young engineering officer, had an idea that would change everything. Alex had been studying the war hive's behavior, patterns. He noticed that it learned very quickly from each encounter, but it always assumed that what it learned was correct. The war hive was so confident in its ability to adapt that it never questioned whether the information it was getting might be wrong. "What if we teach it the wrong lessons?" Alex asked General Walker during an emergency strategy meeting. The general looked confused. "What do you mean?" Alex pulled up displays showing the war hive's attack patterns. "It learns by watching us fight, but what if we deliberately show it fake tactics? What if we train it to defend against attacks that we will never actually use?" It was a desperate plan, but it was the only chance they had. General Walker approved the strategy, and the human forces began the most complex deception in military history. Human ships began using fake tactics that looked real but were actually designed to fail. They showed the war hive weapons that did not exist and defenses that were purposely weak. They made the alien creature believe it understood human warfare when it actually understood nothing at all. The war hive fell for the deception completely. It adapted to counter the fake human tactics. It developed defenses against imaginary weapons. It prepared for attacks that would never come while leaving itself vulnerable to strategies it had never seen. When the real human counterattack began, the war hive was completely unprepared. Admiral Kate Morgan arrived with the combined fleets of 3 human worlds. But instead of using conventional tactics, they used strategies that the war hive had never encountered. The human ships moved in patterns that made no sense to the adapted creature. They used weapons in ways that the war hive had not learned to counter. Most importantly, they coordinated their attacks with individual creativity that no hive mind could predict or understand. The war hive tried to adapt, but it was too late. Its entire strategy was based on false information. Every defense it had developed was useless. Every counter tactic it had learned was wrong. The final battle was fought in the asteroid field where Kepler Prime's outer moon had once been. The war hive, desperate and confused, threw everything it had at the human forces. But human ships danced between its attacks like they were playing a game the aliens did not understand. Lieutenant Alex Turner coordinated the final assault from his position on General Walker's command ship. He had studied the war hive so carefully that he could predict its moves before it made them. When the moment was right, he gave the order for all human ships to concentrate their fire on a single weak point. The war hive died screaming. Its death cry echoed across space in frequencies that hurt to hear. The massive creature broke apart, like a mountain collapsing, its biomechanical components floating in space like the remains of a nightmare. From the wreckage, human salvage teams recovered a single consciousness node. This was a fragment of the hive mind that could still think and communicate on its own. It was taken to a research facility where Dr. Helen Parker worked to build a way to talk with it. When communication was finally established, the node was confused and frightened. It had never existed as an individual before. The concept of being alone with its own thoughts was terrifying. "You destroyed our war hive," the node transmitted when General Walker came to speak with it. "Our collective mourns the loss of 10 billion consciousness units," General Walker nodded seriously. "Your war hive would have killed billions of human lives. We defended ourselves and our colonies. Why do you not destroy this node? Why do you not study our technology by cutting us apart?" Walker looked at the alien construct with something that might have been pity. "Because you are going home. You are going to tell your collective exactly what happened here. You are going to explain that humanity does not make war for conquest or to absorb other species into our culture." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You are going to tell them that when we win, we always send someone back to remember what happened." The node was quiet for a long time, processing this information with its alien mind. "The collective will not understand. We do not comprehend mercy or individual choice." "Then you will teach them," Walker said, "because if your people come for us again, if they send another war hive or try to absorb human colonies, the next encounter might not end with a survivor to carry the story home." The node understood the warning. It was given a small ship and sent back to Veltar space, carrying with it the memory of the war hive's destruction and humanity's strange mercy rule. The collective did not understand mercy, but they understood strength. They understood that humanity had defeated their most powerful weapon, using tactics they had never imagined. The Veltar withdrew to their home systems and began to focus on internal development rather than external conquest. Another enemy had learned about humanity's mercy rule. Another story spread through the galaxy about the strange species that could destroy their enemies, but chose to teach them instead. The galaxy was beginning to change, one spared life at a time. 10 years had passed since the war with the Veltar Collective ended. The galaxy had become a very different place. Where there had once been constant warfare between dozens of aggressive species, now there was peace. The stories had spread to every corner of known space, carried by the survivors that humanity had spared. Ambassador Carl Johnson represented Earth at the first Galactic Peace Conference. It was being held on Haven's Rest, a neutral world that belonged to no single species. Delegates from 47 different civilizations had come together to create new laws for how species should treat each other among the stars. Carl looked around the great assembly hall and saw faces that would have been impossible to imagine in one place just a few years ago. Overlord Vexthan of the Zephyrians sat near delegates from species his people had once tried to conquer. Former War Chief Graklos, who had given up raiding to become a legitimate security contractor, discussed trade agreements with merchants from worlds he had once attacked. Even Vashatar was there, though he looked much older and more tired than the crime lord he had once been. The former syndicate overlord now spent his time warning young aliens about the dangers of choosing a life of crime. He had become something he never thought he would be, a teacher. The most surprising attendee was the Veltar node that had been spared after the War Hive's destruction. It had convinced its collective to send it as their representative. The hive mind species was trying to learn how to exist peacefully with individual-minded beings. Elder diplomat Shaltine of the Arxian Republic stood to address the assembly. The Arxians were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They had watched civilizations rise and fall for thousands of years without getting involved in galactic politics. But now they had something important to say. "We have observed the patterns of war and peace for 10,000 years, Shaltine began. Her voice was old and wise, carrying the weight of millennia. We have seen empires built through conquest that lasted only centuries. We have watched alliances created through fear that fell apart at the first sign of trouble." She gestured toward the diverse crowd of delegates around her. "But we have never seen anything like what exists in this galaxy today. Species that were bitter enemies now sit together as equals. Beings who once killed each other now work together for mutual benefit." The elderly Arxian's gaze found Ambassador Carl Johnson. This peace was not created through conquest or threat of destruction. It was not built through fear or desperate necessity. It was created by a species that understood something that has escaped most civilizations throughout history. Carl felt the attention of dozens of alien species focused on him. Some of these beings had tried to destroy humanity. Others had learned to respect human power. All of them had been touched by humanity's mercy rule in some way. "The humans follow what they call the mercy rule," Shaltine continued. "Always spare one life to carry the story back. What they may not have realized is that in sparing those lives, they saved entire civilizations from the endless cycle of war and revenge." She raised one of her forearms in a gesture of respect that transcended species barriers. "Today, we establish not just peace treaties or trade agreements. We establish the promise of something greater. We establish a galaxy where strength serves, justice where power protects the innocent, and where every species remembers not just the price of aggression, but the value of mercy." Over the following days, the conference created the framework for a new kind of galactic civilization. The Galactic Cooperation Accord was signed by every delegate present. It established rules for peaceful contact between species, guidelines for resolving disputes without warfare, and protections for civilian populations. But more importantly, it created something that had never existed before: hope for a future where different species could coexist without constant conflict. Former Overlord Vexthan approached Carl Johnson during one of the conference breaks. The crystalline being looked very different from the proud warrior who had once led the attack on Earth. His crystal body was marked with scars from old battles, but his eyes held wisdom that had not been there before. I have spent 10 years thinking about what you did, Vexthon said through his translator. Why you spared my life when you could have ended the war by destroying me. Carl poured himself a cup of coffee from the human delegation's supplies. Have you figured it out? I believe so, the alien replied. You understood that killing me would have solved nothing. My people would have chosen a new leader and continued the war. But letting me live, letting me return with the story of human mercy and human strength, that changed everything. Vexthon's crystal form shifted colors, a sign of deep emotion in his species. My people learned that humans were not just another species to be conquered. They learned that you were something new, something that could be both terrible in war and generous in victory. Carl nodded. That was the idea, though I'm not sure Admiral Morrison thought it through that completely at the time. Perhaps not, Vexthon agreed. But the result has been remarkable. Look around this conference. Former enemies working together. Species that once destroyed, each other now building a shared future. As the conference continued, other former enemies shared similar stories. Graklos spoke about how humanity's mercy had taught his people that there were alternatives to a life of raiding and violence. His former warriors now worked as peacekeepers and security specialists, using their skills to protect rather than destroy. Vashatar, despite his advanced age, gave a presentation about the economics of peace versus war. His analysis showed that the resources once spent on military fleets and criminal organizations were now being used for trade, exploration, and scientific research. The galaxy was becoming richer and more advanced because it was no longer tearing itself apart. The Veltar node shared the most alien perspective of all. It explained how its collective had begun to understand the concept of individual choice by studying human behavior. The hive mind was slowly learning to interact with species that did not share a unified consciousness. Humans taught us that strength without mercy leads only to emptiness, the node transmitted to the assembly. The war hive was our greatest weapon, but it could only destroy. It could not create. It could not inspire. It could not teach. As the conference drew to a close, Ambassador Carl Johnson was asked to address the assembly. He looked out at the faces of beings from across the galaxy, many of whom represented species that had once been humanity's enemies. 10 years ago, our species made a choice, Carl began. We decided that being remembered for our restraint was more important than being feared for our ruthlessness. We chose to spare our enemies not because we were weak, but because we were strong enough to show mercy. He paused, looking around the great hall. Some of you learned about humanity through our mercy rule the hard way. You attacked our colonies or threatened our people, and you discovered that human mercy comes with a price. But you also discovered that human mercy is real. Carl's voice grew stronger. Today, we are not just signing treaties or trade agreements. We are creating something that has never existed in galactic history. A civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest, on mutual respect rather than mutual fear. The conference ended with the signing of the Galactic Cooperation Accord. Every species present committed to the principles of peaceful coexistence, diplomatic resolution of conflicts, and protection of civilian populations. But most importantly, they committed to remembering the lessons they had learned. As the delegates prepared to return to their home worlds, they carried with them more than just signed documents. They carried the story of humanity's mercy rule and how it had transformed the galaxy. They carried the understanding that true strength came not from the ability to destroy enemies, but from the wisdom to spare them. The mercy rule had become more than military doctrine. It had become humanity's gift to the stars. The knowledge that being remembered for your compassion was far more powerful than being feared for your cruelty. And across the galaxy, whenever young beings learned about the great wars that had once threatened to consume entire star systems, they learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is let your enemy live to tell the story, because stories, once told, can never be untold. And the story of humanity's mercy would echo through the cosmos for as long as civilizations existed to hear it. The galaxy had learned that peace was not just the absence of war, it was the presence of hope, built one spared life at a time.